Good afternoon and welcome back to docket number 240806, the annual light duty EV charging program review for year 4. My name is Chairman Marissa Gillette. I'm joined virtually today by my colleagues, the Vice Chairman Jack Bukowski and Commissioner David Arconti. We have an agenda in front of us today. We're going to receive a joint presentation from our colleagues at the EDCs, followed by authority staff questions and time permitting, and there should be time questions from other stakeholders. Also have time for general discussion and comment before we adjourn this afternoon. As a general reminder, we are broadcasting this afternoon's technical meeting to YouTube. However, we also have a court reporter with us this afternoon, so please make sure to identify yourself by name and affiliation for clarity of the record. Also, as a general reminder, the chat is not part of the official record. Please refrain from using that feature. And when it is time for stakeholder comment and questions, we ask that you familiarize yourself with the raise hand function under the reactions tab at the bottom of the screen, as I will be using that for our queue this afternoon. So without further ado, we can welcome to the virtual stage the UI and Eversource teams. We'll get the slides pulled up here and turn it over to you for the presentation. I see several folks coming on screen. Welcome.
Okay. I think we're ready to begin. Thank you, and good afternoon, Madam Chairman and PERA staff. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity today to provide to everyone gathered here a brief overview of the EDC's 2024 annual report for docket 240806, also referred to as RE04. My name is Jen Riley. I'm the supervisor of Eversource's electric mobility team, which implements the charging incentives for Eversource. I also have with me today Amy Finley, who's a manager at Eversource, Mark Moniz, who works at Eversource, Rick Rosa, a senior manager at Avangrid, and Charles Spence, who works at UI. Next slide. Okay, here are the topics that we'll be presenting on today. These are all topics which the EDCs covered within our 2024 annual report. We'll be reviewing our program results, which include the implementation metrics broken out per year. Also, the 2024 program updates, including multi-unit dwellings or MUD managed charging pilot, engagement with the Connecticut Department of Transportation on the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, otherwise known as NEVI. We will also give you summaries of proposed program recommendations that were outlined within the report, including workplace port minimums, non-compliant service network service providers or NSPs, proposed changes to the residential program incentive structures, the proposed recruitment of residential EV load research sample, and to round the presentation off, we look forward to some discussion on these points. Next slide. We'll move right into reviewing the program results from both Eversource and UI. Next slide. First up is a slide showing Eversource's 2022 metrics of the first year of implementing the Connecticut commercial program. I'm not going to go through all the numbers on this slide, but you will see that the program generated a great deal of interest. All the ports were reserved and some were waitlisted. I think it's important to point out that of the ports reserved, only a fraction of them were paid out in 2022. Because it does take some time for the projects to go through permitting and actually get installed. Next slide. This slide reviews the commercial data from Eversource's year of 2023. You can see we gained some traction from year 1 to year 2, and the projects were completed at an accelerated pace. We got definitely more installed projects, which is good. And I also want to point out that we added some financial information on this slide that isn't covered in the annual report. In specific, the data we updated was in the DC fast charger section, just to highlight that as a change based on the annual report. Next slide. Okay. This slide shows Eversource's commercial data from this year up to June 30th. Just looking at the data, one can see that there are some verticals, the public ports, and also the MUD categories that are garnering lots of attention, and as such have long wait lists. We get asked daily when we'll be opening more ports for these categories, which is promising that folks are looking forward for more open ports. It's good to see. In addition, I want to make a point to note that this year, Eversource extended our DC fast charger application window until September 1st. And our team is currently evaluating those applications. And thus is the reason why you aren't seeing any DC fast charger ports reserved or waitlisted on this table. We have seen some DC fast charger reserve projects from the first 2 years of the program being completed and submitting payment requests. And that's why you're seeing data in these ports paid column in the table. Next slide. Rick, I think you're going to speak to these.
Thanks, Jen. This is Rick Rosa from UI. Reporting on UI's commercial participation data for 2022. We show that we had a total of 316 ports reserved in that year. It's important to point out that our definition of reserved ports, although the ports paid are isolated and shown separately, really the port reservation definition includes any port given a reservation during the program year. So that would include programs that are still in construction or projects that are still in construction and those that may have been paid out during the year. And also, as Jen referred to, the ports paid is always going to be a lower number than the reservations because of the timeline for these construction projects. Every single one of these applications is a complete and separate small construction site. So for 2022, I thought it was worth noting that 68% of our level 2 ports reserved were in the underserved programmatic area, 58% or 55%, excuse me, for direct current fast chargers, with an overall rate of 67% of our reserved ports being in the underserved areas. Next slide, please. So for 2023, as my colleague at Eversource alluded to, we did see a substantial increase in participation in 2023. These programs, obviously, when they are new, take a little while to get the market going and stimulated. So in 2023, we saw a 63% increase year over year for port reservations. And we also saw a significant increase in the number of ports paid out, which is an indication of the number of ports being constructed overall. Interestingly, the distribution of underserved to baseline communities is very close. 68% of our L2 ports reserved were in underserved areas, 21% for DCFC. Just remind folks on the call that in 2023, we had not implemented the new DC fast charger evaluation criteria yet. And then 70% overall, our ports were in underserved areas compared to baseline. And then next slide, please. So for 2024, we are continuing to see increased program adoption and reservation of ports. It is important to note that these numbers are through June, and just for reference, through August 31st of this year. So UI did not extend its DCFC application period. So we've completed our review and awarding of incentives. So as of August 31st, we are 100% subscribed for the first program year cycle for DC fast chargers. For multi-unit dwellings, through August 31st, we are 100% subscribed in the MUD level 2 charging program area, and we have approximately 115 ports waitlisted. In the destination level 2 program area, as of August 31st, we are 100% subscribed in terms of reserved ports, with 39 ports waitlisted. In the workplace program area, we are 43% subscribed compared to the target goals. If you remove fleet projects from that, from the total that we have reserved through August, we are actually only at 33%. But combined workplace and light duty, we are at 43%. Overall, we are 47% subscribed through August of 2023. We do not expect to see the same significant growth that we saw in 2023, only due to the limited number of port availability left. So a lot of these projects that are waitlisted will carry over into the next program year and program cycle. And with that, I'll turn it back over to my colleague, Jen Riley.
Okay. All right. Where are we on our residential? So these numbers are showing Eversource's residential participation data from 2022. I want to point out that in 2022, Eversource had a total of 1,180 unique participants in the program, with the highest participants in the category of getting a wiring upgrade and purchasing a new level 2 smart charger. Can you go to the next slide, please? All right, now we're looking at the numbers from 2023, where we had 2,586 unique participants. So we're seeing more than double the number of participants in the residential program from the first year. Remember, the first number was 1,180 compared to this new number. It's a net growth of 1,406 unique participants. Yet we're still seeing the largest category of participants fall in the category of getting a wiring upgrade and purchasing a new level 2 smart charger. But if you notice, we'll also see the number of vehicle connections growing. In this year, we're seeing 883 if we count the vehicle connection category with the wiring upgrade and the vehicle connection. So I think that's important to point out. Next slide. Here's the 2024 numbers. You can see these numbers are much lower compared to the previous years. But like we've mentioned before, these numbers only account for data through June of this year when we filed the annual report. And I expect these numbers will be substantially higher by the end of the year. Next slide. Hey, Rick.
Thank you, Jen. So for 2022 and subsequent years, I have to note that while preparing for the technical session today, UI discovered some discrepancies in the values reported on their residential residential values. And so this is a result of actually data that was reported in the annual report in the UI metrics attachment to our annual report. And so we work with our EM&V partners to correct that information, and we will submit to the record a new presentation with the updated residential numbers that I'm going to discuss today, and also a supplement to our attachment to the annual report with UI metrics. And I sincerely apologize for that in advance. So what you're seeing is not going to match what I'm going to speak to, but for 2022, we had 209 enrollments in the residential managed charging programs. I think, one thing I would comment throughout, as you've seen in Eversource's slides, is that I think we are very encouraged by the participation in these programs, and not only the participation, but the ongoing commitment from enrolled participants and shifting their off-peak load. So I think we are seeing very similar numbers. Again, as my colleague noted from Eversource, the bulk of participants, 55% in the case of UI for 2022, are getting wiring and charger EVSE incentives, and about 30%, 28% are getting are either telematics and or wiring and telematics. Next slide, please. In 2023, we actually had 336 participants, so a significant increase over the previous year. Again, very similar numbers. So for wiring and charging, 57% of customers were receiving wiring and charging incentives, and about the same percentage. So relatively consistent year over year, 27% enrolling through telematics or taking a wiring and telematic incentive. So again, very consistent patterns we're seeing so far. Next slide, please. So for 2024, the company actually had 130 program participants enrolled through June. And this is only a half year's worth of data, but we are seeing a bump so far this year in wiring and charger incentives. About 70% of these, the 130 that we have enrolled, are taking a wiring and or EVSE incentive, and only 12% so far have been telematics and or wiring and telematics incentives. So that's where we stand currently. And Jen, I'll hand it back off to you.
Just kidding, Rick. You have these slides.
Oh, I have these slides? Oh,
Yep.
Thank you for reminding me. All right, thank you. So actually, thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Charles Spence, who's going to discuss the first part of this slide regarding the managed charging pilot for multi-unit dwellings.
Good afternoon. Rick introduced me, but I'm Charles Spence. I oversee the managed charging programs for Avangrid. Appreciate the opportunity to provide some of these updates here that you see on this very interesting and novel multi-unit dwelling use case for managed charging. It's a use case we're very excited about. I've been doing a lot of work with various providers to really understand and craft what we think is going to be a pilot that can scale into something much more long-term and robust in terms of the offerings for our customers. I'll give a little context before touching this slide here, but because it's been quite an iterative process to get the program to where we are and contextualize some of the complexity that led to that first bullet point, that there's a limited number of vendors with this solution. So we've been working with the authority and various stakeholders throughout 2023 and 2024 to really nail down what is a smart pilot that we can implement in the managed multi-unit dwelling managed charging space that can be scaled. We took in a lot of comments from various stakeholders here and met with a number of software providers in the managed charging space to really understand what the capabilities really are here. And of course, we collaborated very closely, Eversource and United Illuminating, to propose something in May that we think is a absolutely great pilot, again, with the intent to scale to something more long-term. Let's see here, where am I? One of the most important steps we took was to discuss with site hosts at MEDs that we are aware of, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that they have or they would foresee in managed charging. And we, again, met with a number of software providers to really understand what is the state of the technology that we can implement. It was determined that this is a very nascent and largely underdeveloped area of managed charging in terms of finding a single holistic software platform that can really do what we as EDCs need to be able to do with the load here, which is connecting directly to that end driver who's making load shifting determinations on a daily basis, linking the end driver with their EDC being the entity that can really take those load management decisions happening on a day-to-day basis and extract value for, you know, the various stakeholders on the grid or adjacent to the grid. So we came up with a direct-to-driver approach that we really think is gonna do this for us. We're both on track to have the first phase of this launched by January 1st of this coming year, with a pilot that scales in terms of capabilities and reach throughout 2025, and really reach the maximum number of EV drivers at this very important use case. So I think that gets me to the slide here. So that was the background. Here's some bullet points on some updates we have. Again, it's a pretty novel use case. So there really are a limited number of vendors who can provide this holistic platform. But both Eversource and UI believe we're zeroing in on providers for this, both taking different approaches by virtue of where we are with our different load management technology in general for all distributed energy resources. So Eversource is in the middle of an RFP that I don't have the expertise on it to really go into, but it was opened in 2024 in April, and is seeking to procure as part of that an MED solution that would serve this direct-to-driver. UI, we're planning to expand our existing relationship with our provider and amending our scope imminently. Again, planning to launch a phase 1 by January 1st. To remind everybody on here, phase 1 is a telematics platform that will enable qualifying or EV drivers with qualifying devices, telematics EVs, to join a program similar to our baseline in the single family context with some minor modifications, with the goal of doing a phase 3 and phase 3 that will allow us to connect with a lot more EV chargers, EVSE, and related software at the site itself. Because this does represent a significant expansion in terms of services to be procured, so in terms of software and administration, but also in the services that the EDCs will provide in terms of administration and customer support. The EDCs will require additional budget and FTE resources to implement this pilot, and then more broadly, when it scales into a program, likely a similar need. With that, I think that's all I have. We're just very hard at work implementing this, excited about it. We think this is going to be a use case that serves the Connecticut public long into the future. And with that, I'll pass it, I think, to Jen. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Next slide. Oh, thank you. So these next couple of slides go over the EDC's effort to engage with Connecticut Department of Transportation regarding their implementation of the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program and the 97% uptime, as well as any established enforcement mechanisms that they are considering. In 2023, the EDCs held coordination calls with Connecticut DOT to determine what a grid capacity review process might look like for potential NEVI applicants. I think it's important to note that all the proposed NEVI locations to date have been in Eversource territory. Eversource has shared with Connecticut DOT the interconnection agreement and created a utility coordination form. And you can see a snippet of the form here at the bottom of this slide. So the idea is this form is completed by the EDC's distribution engineering team, and then the electric mobility team helps to shepherd these forms through the process. And to date, over 30 NEVI projects have utilized this form and received a Eversource tertiary review of grid capacity. This was a point that wasn't covered in the annual report. And just an extra factoid, we thought that might be of interest to you. Next slide. So in August of 2023, Connecticut DOT published their fiscal year 2024 NEVI plan update. And within the known risks and challenges section of the report, they stated that Connecticut DOT's grant solicitation process and contracting would be designed to enable the state to oversee project progress and maintain requirements stipulated within the NEVI guidance. And then they go on to say they'll be withholding a portion of the NEVI reimbursement conditional on proof of satisfactory uptime of at least 97%. And they were going to include an enforcement mechanism that funds would be withheld if 97% is not met each year for the 5 years of the operation. Connecticut DOT further confirmed to the EDCs that in the agreement with the NEVI program operators, the state will withhold the 2.5% of each reimbursement grant for the construction. And for each of the 5 years of operation with the 97% uptime, the state will release an equal 1/5 of the withheld funds. In addition, Connecticut DOT is requiring applicants to submit an operation and maintenance plan, O&M, that addresses that the equipment be operational for at least 97% of the time based on the hours of operation. They are planning to collect station uptime data on a quarterly basis and will allow exceptions for equipment to be shut down. And those exceptions are limited, or they're not limited, to electric utility service interruptions, failure to charge or meet the EV charging customers' expectation for power delivery due to the fault of the vehicle, scheduled maintenance, vandalism, natural disasters, and I think they have also excluded hours outside of what the hours of operation are for the charging station. So the EDCs are going to continue to have ongoing conversations with Connecticut DOT about the implementation of data collection and what documentation would be required to demonstrate excluded outages. So stay tuned. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to go through the EDC's proposed program recommendations. Next slide. Looking at the first 3 years of the ED's program, the Connecticut workplace projects had the lowest rebates of all commercial project types, despite having the highest project costs per site and only slightly lower project costs per port compared to some of the other commercial locations. And you can see this on the graph on this slide on the right, on the bottom. And we're attributing this to the incentive structure for the workplace. which requires a 4-port minimum at the same maximum rebate as a 2-port site for all the other level 2 program areas. So to put it in perspective, these workplace sites max out at $40K a site in an underserved location, and they max out at $20K for a workplace that's located in a baseline location. But those site hosts are required to install a minimum of 4 ports. Our data is showing us that the project costs for workplace projects are not substantially different from other commercial level 2 projects, but the minimum port requirements seems to be driving up the project site costs while also capping the site maximum rebates. So the EDC program staff, like we looked into this, and we started asking people who had come to us inquiring about the workplace program, like what was some of their hesitation. And some of the small businesses and municipal customers said they wanted to participate in this vertical, but the 4-port minimums are making them hesitant because they only have 1 or 2 people who have an EV, and they weren't sure if installing 4 ports at this time is a good idea for them. In addition, we heard through our market surveys and analysis as part of our 2024 evaluation report, which I know we're not discussing today, but I think it's relevant to this proposed recommendation on reducing the port minimums for workplaces. We learned in this evaluation that people have high preference for workplace charging. And one point highlighted within our evaluation report that workplace charging infrastructure will have the biggest effect on future EV growth. So the EDCs are trying to find that sweet spot where more businesses are drawn to our workplace program and install them for their employees. So that's why we're taking the data and proposing this new minimum. Next slide. Okay, non-compliant network service providers, also called NSPs. We have 45 network service providers currently on our commercial QPL, or our qualified product list. So site hosts that participate in our program are required to share their charging data with the EDCs. And these vendors that are on the NSP help for this process to happen. And they do that by ensuring that the charging station serial numbers match up with our data aggregator, so that the data from the charging station can be exported to the utility. You can see from this table here that the installed ports that have verified serial numbers are relatively low for both utilities. And these numbers are what we reported in our annual report. And then I'm happy to say that Eversource's numbers have since improved. We're at 78% for our serial numbers matching, of which 996 or 39% of the ports are reporting charging data. There's lots of room here for improvement. We're working to figure out if it's a hardware or software issue that are causing these charging data reporting numbers to come in low, but we're working on it. I think another point to mention here is that the EDCs currently maintain an NSP data integration quality dashboard. That's our fancy name. And this includes keeping track of the quality of data, the vendor's responsiveness to data requests, data lags, and API integration. What we're seeing is that some of the NSPs that we're working with are great. They're in compliance. And then we're seeing the others where they're lacking. And then where does that leave our customers who may have an NSP that really promised more than what they could deliver? And we're not sure. So unless we get the data from the NSPs, we can't know the utilization of the charging station. So we're proposing this NSP correction action plan so we can better understand how customers can switch NSPs. Because like I mentioned, some are locked into an agreement with an NSP that isn't performing like they said they could. And we need to get these stations that are installed sharing data. And we need to do to better understand what the costs and the challenges would be for customers if they want to switch their NSPs. Is not as easy as like taking one little thing in the charger and put a new one in. In some cases it is, they're all different. And I also want to emphasize that this is not a unique problem to Connecticut. This is something that is being discussed nationally, especially with the NEVI program and everything else, because each NSP capability is different. Some NSPs are able to share their data as a SFTP, a secure file transfer, while some have more interfaces that are more automatic and reliable, like an API integration. But the bottom line really here is that unless we get the charging data, we can't see the utilization of these stations, and we really need to better understand the whole how to fix it. So that's why we're proposing this. Next slide. Rick, I think your team's speaking to this.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate that. Rick Rosa, UI. I would just add to what my colleague at Eversource said on the previous slide, that we have been operating make-ready programs in our New York service areas since 2021. And we work, it's a statewide program that we operate in collaboration with the Joint Utilities of New York. So the program is the same across the whole state of New York. And we have similar requirements from our regulators in New York, and similar requirements to our site hosts, and similar processes to collect this data. And this has been a huge issue since the program began, and something that the Joint Utilities of New York collectively have also been trying to work on to resolve data quality issues. So I just wanted to add that this continues to be an ongoing challenge for utilities to collect this data from what seems to be kind of an ever-growing network of network service providers. And I think the approach that the UI and Eversource have put forth here is a good plan, and developed to really focus in and hold these network service providers accountable. So thank you. Regarding the residential program incentive structure, the first and probably most important change that we're recommending is to remove demand response events. And we want to be very clear that we are not proposing to remove emergency demand response events. And the EDCs were required to define what emergency events are in previous proceedings. And those emergency events would be in situations where the EDCs experience extreme first contingency events on the distribution system, where we might implement other measures to reduce load. So we would always maintain within our program structure the ability to implement an emergency demand response event if it were necessary. However, the success of the program since it's changed to a year-round program that shifts peak every day has been very successful. And I think one of the things that our program cycle report demonstrated was that due to that success, there's really very little load to reduce. And the demand response that we did implement resulted in very little curtailment. And so the simple fact here is that the new program design was intended to provide ongoing load shifting, and it is doing that. And it has really eliminated the need to provide demand response events. So I think one thing worth noting is if demand response events removing demand response events were approved by the authority, that would significantly reduce the incentives available to baseline customers. And I would note that, the authority recently submitted a second round of requests for comments in this proceeding, discussing various aspects of the program. And so again, the removal of demand response events would remove that $20 per event incentive, reducing the total incentive for baseline participants to $110 a year. The second recommendation that we're making is to, this may be maybe not the most forthright, or not forthright, but the most accurate description. But essentially, we're proposing to eliminate the EVSE rebate for network level 2 chargers and increase the wiring incentive from $500 to $700, and replace, instead of the $500 rebate for EVSE, we would offer a $300 enrollment incentive for all participants enrolling in the Eversource's or UI's managed charging program, a one-time enrollment incentive of $300. There's a couple reasons for this. One, really what's driving this is we are seeing significant costs for installing EVSE, greater than the $500 maximum that's currently allowed in the program. In some cases, or actually on average at both EDCs, we're seeing average installed upgrade costs of approximately $1,400, or twice the proposed incentive that we're putting forth here. Secondly, EVSE costs are coming down. Both EDCs have added networked level 2 chargers, smart chargers, that are capable of participating in our programs, that are $300. And we expect that in the future, those costs will continue to come down. And so the EDCs believe that restructuring of the incentive from its current form to the form that we're proposing will, in a sense, level the playing field for all participants. We've shown earlier in our data that the bulk of participation that we're receiving is through customers receiving both wiring incentive and EVSE incentives, and at levels, at least at UI service territory, twice that of telematics. And telematic vehicles are vehicles that enroll through telematics are capable of participating at levels that are that will provide us greater advantage and flexibility in the program in the future, because EVSE data is primarily limited to participation in the baseline program, and advanced participation really favors telematic enrollment. So those are the reasons for our proposal here today, and we can move to the next slide. So this slide is regard to our proposal for recruitment of a load research sample. This is really a requirement of continued EM&V of the program to determine its efficacy and how the program is really performing. And so, and since we engaged with our EM&V partners, both UI and Eversource have been using what we call our grandfathered participants, those customers who were originally enrolled in the first program year demand response program only. And we were able to use those customers as a control group because they had only ever received messaging from us for demand response, and they had only ever participated in demand response events. So conversely, participants who have enrolled in the new program since the grandfather program are receiving completely different messaging from us about year-round load shift and receiving nudges and encouragement, and also perhaps tips about how to control their load successfully. And the grandfather participants haven't received that messaging. So they were able to support us for, I think, 2 years now worth of evaluation, both in our first program report that included EM&V, our program cycle report in June, and then this program year for 2023 to 2024 program report in 240806. So that group is really aging out, in the sense that over time their value as a control group and is diminished. And so it's really time for us to switch the remainder of those customers over to the baseline advanced tier, get them involved in those programs, and recruit a new and fresh sample for us to continue to monitor and measure our effectiveness against. So, what we've proposed is to offer customers, and these customers were recruited, I should just clarify, strictly as a control group. So you might envision being recruited if you were an EV owner or potential EV owner to participate in our survey or control experiment to help evaluate our managed charging programs. Those customers would not be recruited with any messaging around managed charging or changing their charging behavior. In fact, we would try to do everything we can to recruit them purely as a research sample and not have them change their charging behavior. We would propose to offer them a one-time incentive of $100 for doing that, and a recurring incentive annually of $25 for as long as they remain in the sample group. The goal is to have 500 participants or EV drivers / vehicles in year one, and retain that load research sample through 2025 and probably beyond. Again, 2 to 3 years is what our EM&V partner tells us is really the maximum effectiveness for our control group. And so eventually we would look to move the new control group, reach out to them and move them into participation in either the baseline or advanced tier of our managed charging program. So that's essentially what our proposal is. And I think that pretty much wraps it up and brings us to the discussion point of the session today. Thank you, Chairman Gillette.
Thank you, and thank you to the team for the presentation. I know that Pure staff have a number of questions on the presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Vigrass in just a second. I'll remind all of the stakeholders that if you also have questions on the presentation, you can get into the queue at any time by using the raise hand function under the reactions tab at the bottom of the screen. And I will turn to you as soon as we get through Pure staff questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Vigrass for now, please.
Great. Thank you so much, Chairman, and thank you to all of the presenters for joining us. First, I just wanted to move back to slide 5 very quickly. I know that Ms. Riley had said that this slide included some updated information on DCFCs, and I was wondering if you could just clarify what update was made.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We updated the average per site costs. I don't think that was captured in our annual report. And I'm just gonna go with, I updated everything in the DC fast charger category. I didn't double check it to the annual report because I think what was in the annual report was very limited. So I wanted to be very thorough and make sure we had the information that was in the same format that the rest of the data was in. So
okay, great, thank you. Great, so now moving to the light duty fleet managed charging program, there were some discovery responses discussing this, and so my understanding is that the light duty fleet managed charging program right now offers fleets 2 methods for participating. One is for those that have EV chargers that integrate with the EDC's load management software, and then for the other option is for fleets whose EV chargers do not integrate with the load management software, and therefore they manually curtail their charging. Is that correct? And then are there any fleets that are currently participating that have EV chargers that integrate with the EDC's load management software?
Happy to respond. Mark Moniz, Eversource Managed Charging Team. I'm going to start off with the second response first. Currently, there is nobody in the program that is using an integrated pathway that we can do it in a non-manual sense. So the 3 sites in the program all are curtailing upon a request via email to do so, and we collect the data thereafter. We do not currently have a scalable I shouldn't say that way. We currently do not have any integrated sites that we are able to call in that manner. Although one of the sites is a partner that we have, we could conceptually do it through their chargers, and we were able to see data more quickly because of our partnerships. But it's still we don't have the integration to be able to call it remotely.
Okay, thank you. And I'll move to UI in just a moment. I just wanted to follow up on that and see, is that a result of the fleets not having the necessary equipment to integrate, or is it also a result of the load management software that the EDCs have?
So it's a combination. So we have 2 of the sites wouldn't be able to do it. with any of our partners right now. And the third one that I just referenced, we currently do not have the capability at a commercial level, but we do at a residential level. So to respond, I guess all three don't have the software capability, but we could foresee one of them in the future being able to.
Okay, thank you. And in the future, do you think that that's a result of the software provider that you currently have kind of increasing their capacity to work with additional EV chargers, or is it more a result of fleets purchasing chargers that work with your software provider?
Sorry, would you say that again? I'm not sure.
Sure. I guess I'm wondering, is there an opportunity in the future for for your load management software provider to essentially integrate with a larger number of EV chargers? Or is it more that for fleets, it really is dependent on them purchasing EV chargers that integrate with your software in order to kind of have you directly control their demand response events?
Sorry, I see what you're saying. I understand. I think it's how the market will move. But I think it will probably be. I mean, there's such a large variety of options a fleet could go with currently, that I think it's going to be somewhere the vendor, the managed charging vendor, and then the software providers will have to kind of meet in the middle somewhere. I think it's going to be a shift of both sides, is my response.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And could UI also provide a response to this?
Yes. So currently we do not have any participants that can participate in a in a manner that integrates with our existing platform. But the thing I want to clarify about this, because I think the EDCs have kind of put this forth a number of times, and I'll go back to 2 points in our presentation. One where my colleague Mr. Spence spoke about our in-depth collaboration with various providers of services in this area. And then 2, when Ms. Riley spoke about the NSP pilot, quality assurance pilot that we're putting forth there, where we talked about the 45 network service providers that are currently on our qualified product list. So the service providers that we work with, both Eversource and UI, this concept of implementing managed charging, whether it's passively or through an advanced control methodology, is something that has been born of and through the residential EV driver experience and utility integrations. The program that was put forth by the authority in Connecticut for to kind of extend this into the commercial world, that is somewhat novel. And so the providers of services within the space that we talk about when we talk about integration of chargers and getting data directly from them, they are primarily focused in the residential space. And so because that's where the market is for them, right? And so therefore there's really no market for them, or hasn't been, in the commercial space. And so they have not had any real motivation or reason to invest in integrations with commercial chargers, those 45 potential network service providers that are on our QPL. And so anytime we talk about new integrations with these providers, whether it's current providers or through an RFP process, there's an additional cost associated with that, right? They say, well, if you want us to spend the money to integrate with certain chargers, it's going to cost X amount of money. And so, we've been, very hesitant to, make that type of investment when we're not sure that it is, really an investment that's worth making. If through a demand response only program, which is kind of goes to the other portion of our recommendation, we can use the existing data that we're getting from the EV chargers. And I know it gets a little confusing. It would confuse a lot of people, confuses me sometimes. The data that we get from EV chargers in the Make Ready program is provided by those network service providers to a different, separately. Some advanced may have, as Jen talked about, an API that our data collection aggregator may be able to use. But we collect that data directly ourselves through the network service provider, and it's a very complex and in many ways somewhat manual, depending on the NSP process to collect this data, aggregate it, and then analyze it. Whereas in the residential programs, we are interfacing directly with the charger and collecting that data in real time. The data that we're getting in the Make Ready program is kind of after the fact, right? We give them 5 business days after every month to give us their data for the preceding month. So it's much more cost effective, I think, from a programmatic perspective, to have a simple demand response program that is easy. And I think we've said this in our response in the annual report, that's easy for fleet owners to understand, easy for them to participate in, easy for them to implement, whether it's manually or they potentially are able to integrate with us. It's most likely going to be a manual occurrence on their part, right? So we can then take the data that comes in from those chargers the following month of a summer month where we're calling demand response events, look at that data, analyze it, and with the help of our partners, determine if that fleet curtailed load after the fact. And so this is why we're really proposing to just, kind of move away from, we're not giving up entirely on integration. I just want to say that, but I want staff to understand that it does come with additional cost. And for each charger that we would ask our provider to integrate with. And so I know I've said a lot there, but I just feel like it was very important to explain the differences between residential programs and how we integrate with chargers and telematics, and our ability to do that with commercial chargers. And I hope I was effective in that.
Sure, I appreciate that. Thank you. So I think actually moving into the direct current fast charger uptime and coordination with the NEVI program, I had some questions about how I think along the same lines of how the EDCs are measuring that performance of the 97% uptime. And my sense is that the EDCs do have some reporting to see that there are DCFCs that are performing at that 97% uptime threshold. And I was hoping that the companies could provide a little bit more information as to how you are measuring that performance.
Rick, did
So-
you want to start with this?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. So, this is a similar issue to what we talked about earlier when we talked about the network service providers and the data quality issues, right? And it becomes a little bit broader in the sense that this is a similar issue that is a challenge nationally because of the NEVI funding, but also jurisdictionally in areas across the country that may have similar programs, and wanting a desire, recognizing a desire, or recognizing the need really to make sure that stations that are incentivized are available, because that's what's expected. It would be expected by this, by anyone, any stakeholder, and it would be expected by an EV driver pulling up to that charger. Unfortunately, the definition of uptime and the definition of measurement of uptime is not something that's been coalesced around. I think what you saw in our responses was an example of a very few, a select number of network service providers that do have the capability to report on that data. That is the exception rather than the rule. So I think it's really important to understand that. And again, this is the same problem that we are running up against in other jurisdictions that we operate in, and that we've seen across the country. And so the answer is, short answer is yes, for those network service providers that we listed in the response to the interrogatory, those can be measured. But you'll notice there's very small variations in each one of them, right? So there's no standard on how uptime is reported. And so because there's no standard, and because each, you have a small set of customers of NSPs that will, and I think I've generously used the word capable, because I think every NSP could be capable. It's a matter of whether they decide to report that data or build that functionality. So you have that data to begin with, and then each one being kind of different. Every measurement of uptime is going to be a little bit different for each network service provider. Jen, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I do want to add to the fact that we are getting data from, I think our slide earlier in the presentation showed you, I mean, we're still lacking data from several of our chargers. But the problem is going to be for us is that how can we know what the outage is going to be? Is it outside the operator's control? Is it like what is the reason? We don't have a way right now of capturing that in our data. And so that's why we're going to have to look at this and continue these conversations with DOT, because of the fact that our data aggregator isn't sure right now as to how we can go about doing this further. So we're going to have to evaluate it. And that we're probably it's going to come at a cost. We don't know what that cost would be. But it's definitely going to be more of an administrative tasks to complete, to understand why they're not, what could be impeding that uptime. Right now we don't have that insight. And Kevin Bond, I don't know if you're on, but if you could jump in, because you've had more of those one-on-one talks with DOT that could elaborate further on this.
Thanks, Jen. So it's Kevin Bond, manager of Eversource Clean Energy Strategy and Business Development. Just to add a little color to the correspondence that we had with Connecticut DOT on this subject. So we did confirm, what the NEVI planned enforcement, mechanism would look like, and what the required data would be to calculate the uptime requirement. But it was still an open question in our back and forth with Connecticut DOT, what the plan was going to be for how the network service providers would deliver the data to the state. Would it be via a certain platform or file type, or manually or automatically sent? If they had come to a conclusion whether or not they would require certain verified network service providers who were able to agree to the data delivery terms, if there was going to be an auditing process for sort of the excluded outages, exceptions, claims, where they're going to require demonstrated documentation to provide evidence that the outage was outside of the or was included in the exception claim. So there was a lot. Sort of the enforcement mechanism was clear. The data that would be required to calculate uptime was clear, but there still an open question as to the executability of those details.
Great, thank you for that. And so is the plan currently that the ability to actually collect that data and then act on it and the enforcement is ready to go when the projects funded through NEVI are installed and ready to function? I guess I'm just wondering what the kind of implementation timeline is for this.
Yeah, so like I said, in our correspondence with Connecticut DOT at the time of the publishing of and even up to today, but up to the time of the publishing of the annual report, those details didn't come out in our conversations. So I think we would have to rely on Connecticut DOT to provide their implementation plan for those sort of open questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. So also within the enforcement information, the companies reported that 2.5% of the grant will be withheld from the funding in order to kind of enforce the 97% uptime. Do you know why that 2.5% was picked as the threshold? And then if the companies were to, adopt the NEVI uptime requirement and enforcement mechanism, do you think that 2.5% would be appropriate for the EDC's DCFC program as well?
So I'll take that. So I don't know why 2.5% was the chosen threshold by Connecticut DOT for their plan for the NEVI program. I will say that, taking 2.5% of the current incentive that we're offering is a pretty small number spread out over 5 years, right? So baseline customer getting $150,000 and taking 2.5% of that and spreading that small number isn't a as a percentage wise like a really big stick, right? For them to be motivated to perform at 97%. They may have other really good motivations like customer service to be at or above 97%, but withholding that kind of small amount, untested, so we don't know if it's a big enough stick or to be effective. But it doesn't feel like, based on our site cap, that it's a really it's not a substantial number. And the costs involved in calculating it, delivering the message, the administration of like an annual payment, administering the excluded outages, claims, may be more than that 2.5% is. So just some thoughts.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you. So in the performance data that the EDCs receive from the DCFCs, do you have a sense for what percentage of DCFCs are performing up to that 97% uptime standard?
I don't know if I have DC fast charger specific data. I could look into it for you.
So I think in our IA response, we did indicate that not all were, and I think it was because we, our data aggregation vendor was able to maybe piece together some pieces of some, but we don't have like a full picture of every DC fast charger station and what percentage of we don't have the data to be able to calculate from all of the different sites that we have. So the answer reflected the fact that based on a spot check, the answer was no, they're not all performing because at least one wasn't.
Great. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is Rick Rosa from UI. I just wanted to add that for UI, same response. And also on your previous question, we agree with Mr. Bowen's comments regarding the size of the proposed penalty the state is putting forth for compliance with uptime.
Great, thank you. So now moving into the network service provider non-compliance proposal. So my understanding is that this proposal is a pilot. So could the companies describe a little bit further how exactly this will be a pilot program? Is it going to be limited to a certain number of stations or customers, et cetera? And then is there kind of a scale up proposal or transition plan to scale up to a larger program?
Sure, I'm happy to start. Go ahead, Jen. I didn't know if you were going to come off mute or not. I was waiting to see if you were going to come
You were
off.
waiting for me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't have a definite answer of how big this pilot will be. I don't think it was going to be very large, but I don't have the numbers in front of me. We've just started outlining it because we weren't sure if it was going to be moving forward. I think we actually put it as a proposal before your draft decision was due. So we've just started comprising it, but based on the based on what we know of the chargers that are out there and what we're learning as we dive further into this topic, we need to get a better handle on how many chargers are Wi-Fi based versus cellular to be able to understand like how many people this would affect, and from there do a percentage for our pilot. So that's what we're currently doing. And then we're also talking to the NSPs about if say it was a Wi-Fi charger, what would entail it to change over to another NSP? Is it just you like go in there and they're able to tap in and get the data, or is it more involved in that? And what is the cost for someone to do that? So there's many variables right now that we're looking at. So I don't have any definite answers for the size. And I think there were additional questions that you asked with that question. But happy to elaborate if you want to reiterate them.
Sure. That was helpful. So essentially my sense is this is a scoping phase of this proposal, and then that costs and implementation timeline would be estimated at a future date. Would you say that is correct?
I say that's correct. And I think one of the barriers we're facing is that many of these customers are like locked in these contracts, and how can we get them out if this is even feasible? Because they've signed, and we don't want them to breach their contract, but at the same time they're not in compliance. So
Right.
so we're not sure what the next steps are. And Rick, did you want to elaborate on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to, so yeah, and I think Jen, thank you so much for taking that question. And it's a good question. And there's really two parts to it. And the part that Jen has been discussing right now is I think what we would envision to be the last resort. So the first part of the pilot is really to use our quality dashboard that we discussed earlier, work with NSPs, try to understand how we can get better data, and actually the first part of this pilot is something very similar to, what we're undertaking in New York. But I think the second part of it is somewhat novel, and so therefore I think it warrants a pilot. So the first part is to really, because customers sign an agreement, and they, as Jen said earlier, they have a responsibility to share data, and it's not their fault. It's, I mean, I guess we could kind of debate that, but if their network service provider is putting them at risk of non-compliance, they may not even know, that that's the case. And so I think the first part of this is working not only with NSP, but also site hosts. And, the other thing is, what we're seeing is a bit of a change in the market, particularly on the residential side, or excuse me, the commercial side, where we're seeing NSPs change their business model from one of a pure network service provider to one of a charge point operator. And this kind of evolves into what Jen was discussing. And so so there are network service providers who are actively seeking to take on additional chargers from other network service providers if they are so equipped, i.e. OC Open Charge Point Protocol standards. If they have that capability, other NSPs can step in and take over a charger. It doesn't have to be the network service provider that the customer originally subscribed with. And so but that gets to be a little bit of a, I think, slippery slope. And so we want to approach that cautiously, as Jen was just saying. And so really, this is why we've proposed it as a pilot. Charles, is there something you want to add? I see you came off camera.
Nope, I've been on camera. Nope, nothing to add.
Great, thank you for that. And so my last question around this is part of this pilot proposal, will you remove these non-compliant NSPs from the qualified products list?
So that is something that we're talking about. Yes, that is one of the options, but what do you do with the folks who already have existing stations that have already enrolled in our incentive program that have these NSPs? So that's what we're hoping this action plan will address both. Understand who has those capabilities to stand behind what they're saying when they apply to our QPL, and those who can actually walk the walk.
Sure, thank you. So now moving into So specifically for Eversource and the DCFC applications, in the company's response to interrogatory CAE 5, the company said that it closed its application period on September 1st. Could the company provide a little bit more information about why it closed September 1st instead of, I believe that Pura had extended the application period until July 1st. So if you could provide a little bit more information about why it went from July 1st to September 1st.
I think the short of it is that we had a program pause. There was some just confusion on should people be going forward with their DC fast chargers applications. We had indicated, yes, you should be still applying to them. But in due diligence, we wanted to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to put their application in. And so it was decided that the September 1st gave people ample opportunity to ensure that they got their application in.
Great, thank you. And did any of the applicants end up dropping out of the application process because of the change in application timelines?
No, I think we got much more because the window was open longer.
Okay, thank you. So my understanding is also that it takes about 2 months to review the applications before issuing an approval. Can you provide a little bit more information about what is included in that review process?
Sure. So we take all the applications, we look at all the information that was provided. We have our evaluation criteria that we're looking at. In addition, the EVITP certifications is a new requirement this year. We've asked everyone to submit their EVITP numbers. We're recognizing that there's many people that did not provide those. So we're taking the extra time to reply back to those folks to say, hey, this is a new requirement, even though we told you before, and to ensure that they get us their numbers so we have them. So when we evaluate all the applications, we have all the pertinent information in front of us. And so we wanted to give ourselves a little extra time to collect those numbers and to ensure that the installers, contractors had time to complete the training, since many of them just were not as familiar with the EVITP as maybe those companies that do national work.
Perfect, thank you. So moving now into the residential single family incentive proposals that were provided in the annual report. So my understanding is that the proposal is to remove the rebate for the EVSE or the level 2 charger and change the wiring upgrade rebate to $700 from $500. Based on the program results that the companies presented today, it appears that the majority of rebates that are being applied to are the wiring upgrade plus the EV charger rebate. And so I'm curious if that is the majority of rebates that are being applied for, then what was the reasoning behind the companies removing the EVSE rebate as an offering?
So thank you for that question, Ms. Vigras. Jen, if you don't mind, I'll start. So yeah, I mean, that's obvious, right? In the data that the majority, and I spoke to that, the majority of our participants and Eversources as well are coming through that incentive level. But it's a very healthy incentive. And so it kind of makes sense. And, again, we're talking about program, this is program year 4 review, and we're talking about, 240806, but again, there is relevant data in support of some of these topics in our program cycle report. And, one of the things that we found, and I think we might have also referenced it in the annual report, subject to check, is that we possibly could be getting more telematics customers enrolled if and so I think it was in the I might ask our EMV vendor to jump in here and save me, but one of the things we found out was that that telematics customers just didn't see as much value for them, and so therefore they were not joining through that channel. If a customer has regardless of whether they have a level 2 charger or not, right? A customer that enrolls through telematics is likely paying some type of a monthly fee associated with being able to have access to those telematics themselves, right? And therefore, that's the reason that we're able to have access to them. So we feel that, eliminating the EVSE rebate and, leveling the playing field and making the program more, we've kind of talked about this from early on, is making it technology agnostic, not favoring one technology over another. The right thing to do would be to have everyone who enrolls, regardless of whether it's the technology that's available to them, gets the same incentive level. I'll leave that there and see if Jen or Charles wants to add anything.
I'll actually chime in here. So Amy Finley, I manage demand response and managed EV charging programs at Eversource. I think when you look at the QPL that we have for EVSE, it's really limited to those chargers that we can connect to and actually do that active control and reliably get the data for. And when you think about, why are we offering that incentive on the EVSE? It's very similar to why we're offering an enrollment incentive for customers to come and bring their telematics. It's incentivizing our ability to connect to that vehicle. So to Rick's point, whether we're accessing that vehicle through the charger or through the telematics, we thought that enrollment incentive being equal for either avenue was appropriate, because that was essentially what that EVSE rebate was for.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So the $300 incentive, the change from $100 to $300 for enrolling in managed charging, did the companies do any analysis on whether that is an appropriate level to incentivize enrollment, or kind of what was the data that underlied that choice?
Yes, we did do some research on this. We looked at programs that operate similar to the programs that we operate across the country and evaluated them and what the offerings were, and that helped us derive that at our result. And I think we presented that information either in our I'd have to go back and check, but I'm fairly certain we presented results from that information. I might ask Demand Side Analytics, who if they happen to know where we presented that research that they helped conduct for us. Adriana, are you on? Could you help?
I am. Hi everybody. My name is Adriana Ciccone. I'm a partner at Demand Side Analytics, and we are the EMV vendor for the 2 EDCs on this program. Regarding the specifics of the data points for incentive comparisons across the country and managed charging, I don't remember the specific number of programs that we looked at, but we did look at essentially across every state that we could find that had managed charging, every utility that had residential managed charging, what the incentive levels were, whether they allowed both EVSEs, telematics, or both, and what the incentives were like. To answer the specific question, Rick, I think that we referenced it in the annual report. I don't believe we sent the accompanying data spreadsheet that summarized all of the specifics for each program that was evaluated or analyzed. But I think there was some discussion in the annual report that summarized the general findings and provided some support for that, the updated incentive numbers.
Great, thank you.
And then just to chime in here, I do think that we provided that with the answer to one of the recent IRs.
Yes, I think CAE 12.
Yes.
So thank you for reminding us.
Great, and I just have one more sort of comment on that question, you know, about the managed charging enrollment incentive itself. $300 is high, but I think it's important to take that into context because we have, you know, the managed charging enrollment incentive, we have the ongoing incentives, we have the make ready incentives, and some of these other jurisdictions also allow customers to enroll in a time of use rate or an EV time of use rate, which, you know, is essentially, you know, compensating customers further for charging during off-peak times. So there's a lot of different, you know, factors in play that if you strictly look at the enrollment incentive itself, it seems high. We also considered, you know, because we are making the change with eliminating the EVSC rebate, increasing the wiring upgrade, we didn't want to take away too much of that upfront incentive that is accessible for customers in this year, which is why we wanted to keep customers relatively whole in terms of what they could expect to receive from us from those upfront incentives, regardless of if it's split between managed charging enrollment, EVSC, wiring upgrade, taking away that EVSC. So we're kind of looking to make that up with just those two other remaining buckets. But I do think that it's a good point, something that we can keep an eye on, you know, going forward. Is it worthwhile in subsequent program years to decrease the amount of that enrollment incentive?
Sure, that makes sense to me. Thank you. So now moving into the managed charging pilot for multi-unit dwellings. So my understanding is that it's a 3-phase pilot proposal with phase 1 beginning in January of 2025. Will both companies planning on launching phase 1 in January? And is there a set group of customers that are planning to participate in phase 1? Essentially just wondering if you could provide a little bit more information.
So I'll go first for UI. We are planning to launch January 1st, 2025 with that telematics solution. In terms of the intended group, it's largely going to be the MBDs that we're aware of through the Make Ready side of things, working directly with the site hosts to identify users, and then we'll engage them kind of directly. You know, the part of the effort here with MUD is it's a different sort of challenge with the site host, who kind of is the funnel we have to go through for a lot of the participants, to kind of create a back and forth where we're promoting the program and making it seem like a good value for everybody involved. But that's going to be a large focus of ours is working directly with the site host for that.
So Charles, the customers would only need to be be on our qualified product list, right? The telematics for their vehicles.
Yes. Yeah. But that's more specifically, in terms of capability. It's a matter of site hosts who exist at existing MUD sites. Tenants that exist at existing MUD sites with qualifying devices. Yeah.
Thanks. I just want to make that clarification.
Great. And just to confirm, is Eversource also planning on launching January 1st?
Yes. We use Eversource. Yes, we're planning on also launching on January 1st. As stated in the presentation, we're in the process of bidding for that vendor, doing procurement for that RFP, and that will, of course, affect how quickly we will need to stand that up. But we are planning on starting that on January 1st, as UI is with phase 1.
Okay, great. And do the companies have a sense of the number of customers they are hoping to enroll in phase 1?
I will. Yeah, I was going to let UI answer that first.
Yeah, that's all right. I think so. Broad goal for us, and maybe Rick can tag on to what I'm going to say, is our broad goal is not to limit, have a cap by any means. So it's really whatever we're able to, whoever we're able to get into the program is what we're going to be able to provide for. In terms of a forecast for that, yeah, Rick, I don't believe we've done an exercise forecasting that.
That's fine. And yet we haven't, Ms. Vigrass, to be more direct. Yeah. We've been focused really on the technology portion of this. But I think that, for phase 1, if customers are able to, have telematics that are on our QPL, I think we should be successful. I was going to say very successful. I'll walk that back a little bit. I'll say successful and hopefully report very, very successful later. Yeah, because there's not much to it. You just really Axe-Very, as Charles said earlier, phase 1 is very similar to baseline residential customer single family program right now for MUDs, and I think it's really really limited, or the success will be in our ability to conduct outreach and education to those customers and recruit them into the program. So so short answer is we don't have a target number. If the authority would like a target number, I think I'll go ahead and say, we would certainly, work with our colleagues at Eversource to try to put one together for you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks. So given thinking about the cost estimate for the pilot, so in interrogatory CAE 7, UI provided an estimated cost of $1.2 million for the vendor and software costs. Could you provide a little bit more information on what that cost is comprised of?
Sure. Oh, go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, happy to. It's largely the software solution, so expanding capabilities from just a telematics platform. Rick had mentioned some of the integrations required for an NSP. It's similar case here. Is anytime that there's a new device we want to connect with, anything, we have to our provider has to spend resources on it. And in the MUD context, there's different chargers generally than there are in the single family. Therefore, there's other integrations that need to be made. There's different interfaces on the phone that need to be made in terms of the app. So a bulk of that is in setup and ongoing development of those 2 phases beyond just telematics, which is kind of out of the box right now. And then program administration in terms of ongoing customer engagement, enrollments, outreach, those sorts of things. So it's kind of all in for the pilot, if that makes sense. Rick, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I would just add that I think we tried to be clear that a lot of those costs, whether are initial investment costs and not ongoing costs, right? So so you think about phase 1, not not super expensive, I think, to implement. Then, successive deployment of phase 2 and phase 3, where we are implementing this program on top of any and being able to kind of live on top of the actual network that is on that MUD. That this investment could also, as Charles briefly alluded to, could help us as we talked. I know I spent a lot of time on with the fleet program as well, because if we're able to develop this technology to kind of sit on top of the networks with another protocol, which I'm not going to try to state. Charles knows it. He's the man that needs to know it. But there's this other protocol that allows us to sit on top, and with the MUD's owners' permission, we can integrate. That level of technology will be able to enable us further in the fleet, and possibly even, when we get to medium heavy duty vehicles, into that realm as well. So yeah, it's a big cost, and we wanted to be transparent. This is what it's going to cost. But if it goes, I think I know we'll be successful, and these programs are planned to 2030. So beyond the initial investment, it will allow us to continue to recruit MUD customer EV drivers through 2030.
Sure, I appreciate that. So is the cost that you've estimated, is it primarily for the capabilities that are required for phases 2 and 3? So essentially phase 1, could you do that right now without any costs?
Yes, short answer. It is, the bulk of it is in those final 2 phases. There would be some costs in terms of implementing the phase 1, minor stuff. It's just a matter of adjusting kind of the entry point for customers, and some of the communications and things like that. But fundamentally, the app, if we're phase 1 is telematics. We already connect with a very large number of telematics platforms. So launching that would be a minor cost compared to the phase 2 and 3. Yeah.
Okay, great. And for phase 2, is the cost essentially a fixed cost, in that, regardless of how large the program is, you have to pay this much to contract with the vendor, or is it more reliant on the number of chargers that you're connecting with, or the number of customers you're working with?
Yeah. So Charles, if you don't mind, I'll take that one.
Yeah,
So,
go for it.
the scope of work that we've been working on with our provider is really technology based, and the scope of work is really not based on number of customers they're supporting. It's the technology that's supporting. So as you know, phase 2 is the use of increasing the availability to different MUD customers through the use of an RFID chip, right? And then with phase 3 being the ultimate goal that we just talked about. So that's really how the scope of work is framed. And then Charles comments regarding standing up phase 1 is there'd be additional cost to that, because we'd have to pay our vendor for, our original scope is also primarily technology based, but also customer based as well. So we need to pay them something to manage additional customers on their platform, so I hope we answered the question there.
Sure, thank you. And so turning now to Eversource, does Eversource have a sense of what the cost might be to implement the pilot program, and is it similar in that the costs for phase 1 might be generally low, but the bulk of the costs are associated with phase 2 and 3?
It's hard to determine at this time with the RFP process going on. Is the current answer. But from the costs I've seen from residential, it seems like we're doing a lot of what we would be doing for phase 1 already. So development costs would be low.
Great, thank you. And definitely understanding that you're still in the RFP process. Just wondering if you have a general sense of, would the cost be around the estimated cost that you guys given, around that kind of 1.2 million, or would it be higher or lower, etc.?
I don't think I should answer yet because I'm not sure. It's the answer.
Great. Okay. I understand. So has the company chosen a vendor yet, or do you have a timeline for contracting with a vendor?
We have not chosen a vendor yet. We hope to have the vendor set up by the beginning of next year.
Okay. Thank you. And I guess my last question is, did the EDCs consider it a joint solicitation for the vendor for this pilot?
So I'll go ahead and take that one, if you don't mind. Eversource, to my understanding, and they can speak to this particular portion of it, but Eversource implemented I think a broad RFP for a provider to, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, to handle all aspects of not only EV managed charging, but I think even perhaps other elements like thermostats and things like other programs that they have going on. I see people nodding their heads, so I think I'm on the right path, right? So we were not at that point, since we had just recently conducted a pretty comprehensive procurement process ourselves for our current provider, and we leveraged the resources of the 3 operating companies that we have managed charging programs in, because our managed charging programs in New York at our 2 affiliates there are almost identical to the ones that we operate here in Connecticut. So we went out to bid for a provider specifically for EV managed charging programs for the 3 operating companies that we administer programs for. So timing didn't work out, and scope was not the same. So
Amy Finley with Eversource. I'll just chime in that I think we're still looking to make the program offer as similar as possible, regardless of which vendor was chosen. So if that was a concern, it shouldn't be.
Great, thank you. So those are all of my questions, Chairman. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to Attorney Wheel.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. Tom Wheel for the Office of Consumer Counsel. I have several questions, so I'll try to get through them fast. I was looking at the participation data slides, the first 12-ish slides. I was just, does this data capture the periods when both companies had paused the program while they were seeking cost recovery through the RAM?
This is all data that we have, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, same for UI. Yeah, it was a brief pause.
And were you able to see if there was any trend, like downward trend for the period of that pause in enrollment?
I can speak for Eversource. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think that if I remember correctly, the UI period was longer than Eversource period, right? So just curious if there was any detectable impacts from that.
Yes, Attorney Wheel. no detectable impacts because while we had a couple of phases of the pause, and I would ask you to bear in mind that the folks on this technical session are program administrators, and our responsibility is to implement these programs that have been entrusted to us, but also implement the wishes of our organizations. So I appreciate, you understand that's a, bit of a fine line there. So, so as I recall, there were kind of a couple of phases of the pause where we were accepting, we were accepting applications, but we were not reviewing them. And then I think later we went to a pause, like a kind of a full pause, I guess I'd call it, where we just stopped accepting applications. So it's very difficult for me to say with any certainty whether we might have been impacted by that. However, I think that the number of reservations that we have existing through 2024 and the fact that we're going to continue to be oversubscribed, except for the workplace program area, is a positive. And I guess that's the best answer I could give you.
I can give you Eversource's answer. So we had a very brief pause of payment processing. We never stopped taking applications. We continued to do things behind the scenes. So we did not see any effects on our program enrollment.
Thanks. And just a follow-up, did the companies receive any complaints or comments from customers about those pause periods? Do you know?
Yes, we received complaints. I think we've received OCC, or I think the authority received complaints. We absolutely received complaints. Yes.
And Eversource, did you also?
We received feedback on this. Some people, it was positive and negative. So we just took them all in.
Okay, thanks. And acknowledging from your comment earlier, Mr. Rosa, this might not be the question for this panel, but I just was curious if you have any update on whether the companies are committed to continuing to provide this program or if we can expect future disruptions.
To my knowledge, Attorney Wheel, all indications that have been given to me are that, we are, given, the results of recent proceedings, we are fully committed. There are no plans that I am aware of for future pauses or interruptions to these programs. I think to be, completely transparent, I think, there have been concerns about the potential for the medium heavy duty docket. But I think, again, what I am hearing is that we are committed to implementing those programs as well. But, we are completely open to whatever serves the interests of our customers the best. And so if that were to be a third party, in some cases, as I think, one alluded to in one of the medium heavy duty interrogatories or line of questioning, or even in these programs, I think, we as program administrators, we want to do the best that we can for our customers, and the ratepayers that are supporting these programs. And I am not, I'm aware of a lot of the frustration that has been, out in the public recently with, July bills and everything. And I'm very sensitive to that. And so, our goal is to use our ratepayer funds as efficiently as we possibly can and get the biggest bang for the state out of that buck. And so with that, I'll just conclude that, to my knowledge, all indications are to me that we are committed to moving forward with these programs.
Thanks. It's the same answer for Eversource. Just wanted to give you a chance to.
Yes, we are fully committed to the electric vehicle program and moving forward with this.
Thanks. I had one more question on that subject, and Mr. Rosa, you touched on it a second ago. I am aware, tangentially, vaguely, of some legislation that was passed in the last session that I think does contemplate the possibility for a third party to administer this kind of program. I was just curious if the companies had kind of looked into whether that would be a more workable model.
Attorney Wheel, more workable model is kind of, I think, is a term that is open for interpretation. At the end of the day, the programs have to be paid for, right? So is a third party a better provider? I don't know. We use third parties to help us and support these programs. We contract with them. Could those contractors be easily contracted by the state to do the same things? Sure. I imagine they could be, and I don't see any reason to shy away from that. I think the benefit that is derived from participating or administrating these programs through the utility is, aside from some of the fallout of cost recovery and things like that, which are honestly above my pay grade. You have a very committed group of individuals and professionals here that are subject matter experts and a wide variety of topics in this subject matter, right? So, and I'm not saying that wouldn't exist elsewhere, or that couldn't be developed by another entity. But I think, traditionally, the utilities have demonstrated over the years that we've been, most capable of implementing these programs. And, again, aside from, some of the recent issues that, as my employer are important to me, but as a program administrator, honestly are not. The fact is, we are committed to innovation. We are committed to working with the authority and other stakeholders, including OCC, and want to deliver really great programs for the customers. We're all very excited about these programs. I could tell you I could just speak to you for my team. We have a very, very dedicated group of professionals here. So yes, I mean, are we, would I hate to see the EV programs go to a third party provider? Absolutely. Because I would miss them. But if the state were to find that it was more cost effective or advantageous and better for ratepayers and EV drivers to administer them elsewhere, I would accept that.
So Kevin Bond again for Eversource. I mean, I'll just say that, for the core program administration, the installation of charging ports and the managed charging programs, the company believes that we are the best positioned to continue to lead these programs based on our experience, our knowledge of the grid, our relationship with our customers. There could be some program elements like fleet advisory, where we can use a vendor to help administer parts, but generally, Eversource is a partner with our customers, a trusted advisor in this space. So I'll just say that.
Thanks. I'm going to move on to, I just have a couple other questions with the chairman's permission on it, just a couple of the other topics. Looking at slide 22, which is just the slide talking about non-compliant network service providers. I can't recall who was discussing this earlier, but I thought I heard someone say that the low reporting percentage isn't a Connecticut only problem. And I was just curious if either company knows how Connecticut's comparing either nationally or to New England states that have similar data.
I can tell you that in Connecticut, we are performing right now. We are performing better than we have been in New York, in our New York. My colleague was able to IM me while we were off chat. That the Eversource noted that their I forget the name of the word I'm trying to think of. The matches. Thank you. So the serial number matches, ours, since the report that we filed, ours have increased to 82% and 49% of the data. So they are increasing. So I can tell you for sure that that performance is better than what we're realizing in New York. And I will tell you also that in New York, we had to actually the entire JU jointly contracts with a singular provider. We had to procure a new provider to help us more effectively get the data that we need. So I think we're in much better shape in Connecticut.
Thanks. Does anyone from Eversource have any similar?
I don't know where we stand nationally or on the East Coast in our matching of serial numbers, but we definitely have, as we start diving more and more into this, we're finding solutions and coming to a better understanding of where we need to be and talking with other utilities. I don't think we've compared ourselves. We're just trying to find ways to improve. So that's what we've been really focusing on.
Thanks. I had one question on the NEVI funding, which is just, it's my understanding that there's an estimate of like 52 million. That's the allocation to Connecticut, but I was just curious if that's the right number that we should be looking at, or if there's any update on what the scope of that funding is going to look like.
I think that's a Connecticut DOT specific question. We've only been privy to the information that's been in their report and what they've put on their website. We haven't talked any additional statistics with them.
Okay. I think I got that number from their website. So maybe I'll check with them. My last couple of questions are just about the the proposed incentive adjustments. On slide 23, it references the average wiring cost being over $500. I was just curious if there's a more precise number, like what is the average wiring cost?
So when we looked at this, I think, as I said, subject to check, I believe that UI and Eversource were aligned or very close with the average wiring incentive being approximately $1,400 across all enrollees in both operating companies.
Yeah, I was just curious if that means like $50,000 is over $500, and so is $501. So I was just curious the scope of like what over $500 means.
And I'm sorry, could you repeat the context the question was presented in, Attorney Wheel?
Sure. I'm looking at slide 23, and it says the EDCs are seeing average wiring costs over $500. So I was curious if that means like over 500 and under 600. Like
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that slide is very generic. Yeah, as I just said, the numbers that we're seeing when Eversource and UI have been collaborating on this, the numbers that we're seeing is across both operating companies and all enrollees, the average incentive is approximately $1,400 per customer. So it's well above $500. And I suppose we could have said that. Not sure why we went so low.
Gotcha. Well, I get it, I think, because it's suggesting like you need to come up from the $500 current rebate.
Yeah.
That I understand. I was just curious what the scope was. And as I understand the overall proposal, let me know if I'm thinking about this the wrong way. We're basically removing a $500 incentive and shifting and bumping up two other incentives by $200 each. So does that, which, simple math, there's $100 left over. Is it right to think that that's going to reduce the overall program budget slightly? Because there'd be a net effect of $100 potential per customer removed?
No, I don't think that's correct. So I think what we're proposing is to take the existing $1,000 that exists today, up to $500 for EVSE, up to $500 for wiring, and just redistribute that as eliminating the rebate for EVSE, establishing a one-time enrollment incentive for anybody who participates in the program, regardless of technology, and then $700 and wiring upgrades. So that equates basically to the same $1,000. I think where we would see savings is the elimination of demand response events, because right now a baseline customer gets $20 a month over the four summer months if they respond to all demand response events. And so that's an additional $80 per baseline customer. So we would save. So by eliminating demand response, we could eliminate those incentives, and baseline customers would only be eligible for that $10 a month for their load shifting.
Okay. The last question is this is maybe just curious, like how outlandish this scenario is. Is there any concern for a scenario where there are customers who have already received their upfront $500 incentive but haven't yet received their managed charging enrollment incentive, so would receive kind of the best of both worlds, like the full that's being proposed to be removed plus the increased incentives? Does that make sense? I'm imagining like a scenario where someone's already bought their EVSE but hasn't installed it yet. If there are a bunch of people who are sort of bridging that gap between incentive adjustments, is there a possibility for kind of double dipping, if that makes sense?
I don't see an opportunity for double dipping, but I do. I'm sorry. I don't see an opportunity for double dipping, but I mean, I do see there obviously will be people. I mean, typically when we implement these things, we implement them on a moving forward basis. So, any new enrollees would be eligible for these new incentives. And so, we might have people who got $500 for a wiring upgrade that might be upset.
I can speak to too. I think another reason that this won't happen as often is because somebody who receives a $500 EVSE rebate currently does not get the enrollment incentive. So they won't be on track to get an enrollment incentive. So I think that might catch that as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking up so much time. That was OCC's last question.
Can I follow up on one thing, Madam Chairman?
Sure.
Okay. So we did follow up for the question about if we would save anything, about if we remove the demand response incentives, we would save about $500,000 a year. Just to follow up with the question that was brought up, we tracked that down quickly. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. Are there other stakeholders with questions on the presentation? All right. If not, we kept you all on there for quite a while answering questions. So appreciate the presentation and all of the answers to the questions that were posed. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
us.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other stakeholders with a comment before we move to adjournment today? Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, then we are going to move to adjournment. This was our last technical meeting for this year's annual review. We do have a briefing opportunity. Briefs are due September 26th. I believe we are issuing a specific prompt later today or tomorrow. So we look forward to reviewing any materials that are submitted on brief. And we'll take those under advisement. We're slated to issue a draft decision in this matter at the end of October. So I want to thank everyone for your participation in this docket to date and look forward to reading those briefs.